Hello, everybody. Here I am again to read some poetry to you. This is the occasion of my new book, Saxophones Were Banned in Albania. And I'll tell you a cute story about that when I get to the title poem. The first two sections are kind of heavy because it's a kind of heavy world out there. And then the last section reminds us of all the good that we have. The first poem is At Play. Night comes quickly, day after day. Keep them rich, make them pay. Let them not be a weft unraveled, nor sing to worn-out ears. Night, you gate superbly rusted, never out of date, speak to me clearly. Teach me to pray, not to a hostage God, I say, but to the spheres, but to the parent universe, patient and wise, if terse, austere beyond this verse, distant but hard at play. I guess I'm really trying to connect the world and even the universe with a level of awareness. This is a poem I'm particularly fond of. It'll speak for itself. It's a little autobiographical. Brooklyn in your heart. The last thing you did that felt dangerous was steal pickles from the barrel at Mr. Icon's grocery. Also, a few lima beans you planted in wet tissue paper. Remember, this is Brooklyn. They turned into nice leafy plants. You and Beatrice Angel gobbled up some of her family's Thanksgiving turkey before the dinner. How were you to know your parents were away so they could feed you? Before you loved reading, you learned there were worse things than getting caught. Bonnie and Clyde, they were kids who stayed that way and went too far. The anger of those thieves who finally take what they need. Doing without, as they advise all bottom dogs, squeezed you pretty dry. But what am I trying to say, and who needs to know? In Brooklyn, you still knew what to do when you were mad. Call it bored, dishonest word. Okay, hurt. After the move, you cowered. The Cape Cod kids ganged up on you. But how good those pickle actions, that helping of yourself to happiness. You should remember to keep Brooklyn in your heart. The next poem is, I guess I'm easing into the dark ones. Bison Calf Nuzzling Its Mother, which was a photograph in the National Geographic Yearbook of 2011, and it was taken at Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. Bison Calf Nuzzling Its Mother. The dark-horned mother, old with grief, her newborn calf, the same sad eyes, frightened as hers once were. Now, resigned to long endurance, they bear weight and power. The calf's fur is red as some Midwestern earth, the mother's dark brown, ragged, matted. Harbored in both faces the hunted history of their species, killed by the millions. The calf rests in these hours' brief comfort, its sorrel bounty under siege. These two beloved symbols of the past, what was, what might have been, herds roaming free on native land, leave their mark in me. Taking their burdens for granted, they soldier on. I just saw the opera The Trojans in the simulcast series at Dartmouth. And this is a poem about Dido, which the second part of the opera is all about. Dido, the Queen of Carthage. Dido, through pain I've learned to comfort suffering men. That's a quote from the Aeneid, Book 4, lines 861 to 2. And it's Aeneas talking. Dido, another one of us undone by love, the studied art of powerlessness. The losers are the wiser ones, but wisdom doesn't save us from our bitterness. Soldiers without guns, builders who lose their homes, lovers too often unloved. This widowed queen, whose brother tried to steal her wealth, managed to sail away, founded a thriving city of her own. When Aeneas left, of course they had a love affair, she, wisest of the Tyrians, maddened by love, destroyed herself and, incidentally, all of Carthage. How did it happen? Stuff of the gods, we know their pointless nastiness. We're theirs to use, then casually condemn. Later, when he, privileged tourist in the underworld, told her he didn't mean to hurt her, she lowered her head and walked away. As he looked on, he pitied her. Did Virgil mean it so? We can't be sure. Reckless whims of the traductores, the translators. But it would figure, yes. Rome, synonymous with power, devoured both Queen and Carthage, the details still obscured. And this is my woman's page on the other side of the page, Toro. This female creature, so completely other, Matador, her shiny suit of lights her brother cleans. He, like the others, didn't make Matador, and now serves her. She says, the person who wishes to be a matador wishes to reach beyond herself, to transcend human limitations. Life is a dream, momento de la verdad, moment of truth, moment of the spear. She must know the exact second for stabbing when the poor mesmerized bull is hers. She warns him with her loud, oddly intimate shout, Toro! Later, on the beach, dressed in a bikini, she shows her many scars to the videographers. Two very courageous women. There are a lot of anti-war poems in here. Here's one of them. Accursed he who first invented war. And there's a quote from Christopher Marlowe's play Tamburlaine, 17th century, late 16th century. They knew not, they knew not simpleness, how those were hit by pelting cannon shot, stand staggering like quaking aspen leaf. And then I also have a quote from Robert Bly's Kabir book, 13th century mystic, Indian. You have been sleeping for hundreds of thousands of years. Why not wake up today? If we can't live the miracles we are, defeat the bully past, our habits of desire, are we accursed? We aren't even doomed. Unnerving patience of the galaxies. We are a link, a note lost in its melody which fails to search for home, and our sad, sleepless molecules are waiting even as we sleep or stroll about. Should we return our keys and pass ourselves along? The best in us loves what's eternal. A cat, a horse, a dog, wild turkeys, hungry deer, the pulse of birds and of rivers, their thickets proving dearer than our own. Our part is grieve, a kind of prayer to learn to link in patience, not despair, to our eternal selves, which strive as one, cannot survive except as one. How long have we been cursing war and getting killed before our time? For Carol, we're on the same road, you showing your paintings, me giving readings from my book, with no idea, despite persistence, whether my poems go deep enough. Be a rock that sinks, you say, then you'll be able to move about in the deep. I could tell you that doesn't work for me. Instead, I quote inspiring lines from Rilke, Jimenez. Start then, turn to the work, for the work is the only thing that lasts. That's a quote from the Spanish poet Jimenez. Let's embrace consciousness, goodwill. Somebody wrote that we're not alone when we're with our art. It's almost as good as the truth. This is a cute one. I was reading some of these from a proof to my son in California, and he said, "Why didn't you read this one first? This is good." I guess he didn't like all the others. This kind of popped out of me. It's a little different. In the garden of clamorous repentance. In the garden of clamorous repentance, a headstrong, impatient witch curses and plucks you out if you don't bloom on time. She might be an angry ancestor. You could be a weed after all. She'll bite you off or let the rain unravel, trample you. Then you'll be neither flower nor root. The grass will drink your tears when you only needed more time. Irregular and not to be imitated. There were times when the ancient Chinese ignored the lu shi, the strictly regulated poems. The Greeks only tolerated accidental rhyme, and the Japanese shunned it altogether. If we're sticking to our own turned versions, it's a game, strenuous as tennis without a net, as Robert Frost said. Strenuous, all right. Fire inside, gleaming, preaching, cowering, pouting. If we don't make our own dances, the angels won't know what to do with us. This is a kind of a weird one, and I guess I'm going to read it just like in the past. I always have at least one weird poem in my books. Lighthouse. Exertion's lively dance. At 80, that's Merce Cunningham, Merce's lighthouse limp. The handwriting fights the eye reading. This vowel I love, patient as all waters. Ferocious armada of court clout clowns. Larks, lighthouse leap, behind which Anna's mad. Prenzlauer Street, Berlin. In 2008, I was invited by the city of Berlin to visit at their expense because I left Germany as a refugee. Prenzlauer Street, Berlin. Here we are, you and I, strolling down the street on which Germany's greatest wartime artist lived most of her life, forgetting Katie Kollwitz, escaping into the present. I came here to try to recapture a bit of a childhood abruptly interrupted by the Nazis. Your wife had proffered you as a companion to encourage my quest. We sit down by old oaks in front of a sycamore's open arms. You show me its green seed balls. They fall last of all, outlive their leaves. I'm missing my favorite black sweater. You go back to the cafe, are told a woman with long dark hair claimed it. I wish the long-haired thief well. The trees grow dark this still September night. You call a cab. We go back to the hotel. I'm going to skip and then I'm going to come back because there are some other German poems. Well, maybe I won't skip. I'll get mixed up. Baudelaire's Cat. This is the French poet. Crank of the coffee maker, loud chatter of those not sunk in their machines. I'm reading fitfully, musing about my affinities with Baudelaire's sensuous love of crowds, coffee houses, cats. But les yeux des pauvres, the eyes of the poor, don't stare hugely, hopefully, into my cafe window as they did into his, and I can't help wondering, in a time of great untruth, can I still choose life to the end, die greenly? Baudelaire once asked his cat if he was God, and this is from a translation of mine, was amazed to find his pallid gaze, clear flames, live opals fixed eternally on me. Once at a meeting, mine poured himself languidly into the only free chair, joined in with the business of my species. Another act taking place in a land not ruled by mutual consent. Suffering in the eyes of our poor persists, Baudelaire. Comfort of coffee houses and of cats, the wheels of their rusty eyes. I spend a lot of time in cafes. Caravaggio, as many of you know, was a great 16th and late 15th century poet. What am I saying? Painter. Brilliant painter. Caravaggio. Caravaggio was dissolute. His gifts were sublime. In St. Matthew and the Angel, a youngish nude, one wing grazing his shoulder, her head pressed against his, guides his hand across his sketchbook. His feet turn in towards each other, the toes flexed in great-hearted play. But the church fathers refused the painting. A saint with legs crossed, bare feet rudely exposed. In 1610, at age 36, he fled from Malta to Sicily, painting everywhere with desperate speed. While waiting for a boat to Rome and pardon for killing in self-defense, he was taken for another criminal because of the scar on his cheek. Released, he ran frantically back along the beach under the burning sun, after the ship carrying his things out to sea. He fell asleep there in a high fever, died miserably alone. The thing that's striking is that he kept working at his art desperately. He had to get that stuff out. Paints a lot of religious scenes. Urgent, and this has a epigraph from this great Spanish poet Antonio Machado, who died when he escaped Spain during the Civil War, died climbing the hills of France. A tiny noise is enough to kill you, the noise of some other heart falling silent. I love that. Urgent. If you cry for help inside your room, no one will hear you. If you cry outside, you'll have to give fake reasons. This is urgent. There's more to it than staggering modernity. The universe preoccupied, it's late. We might be judged by what we give to life, hungry life, hunched in that corner over there. Well, here's the title poem. Saxophones were banned in Albania, and I've got a real cute story about that. I was in the Dartmouth bookstore, and I am not very good with a computer, and I couldn't find my table of contents for this book, which I was putting together. And I asked a young man who was sitting not far away if he could help me find the file. Sure, he said. And when he found it, he sort of frowned and stared at it. And I said, oh, they're just poems. You know, that's how a lot of people do feel about poems, let's face it. Not that I like it. And I said to him, you have an accent. And he said, yes. I said, where are you from? He said, Albania. So I dedicated the poem to him. He had just graduated from Dartmouth, and we began chatting like long-lost relatives. He was thrilled, and I was thinking of using that title because it was catchy, and when he liked it so much, I decided, well, yes, I will use that title for the book. Saxophones were banned in Albania. Edi Rama gave up painting in Paris to be the mayor of Tirana, as when the new Prime Minister of Spain announced, from now on, art and artists are our most important export. And, kissing the fleeting joy, I wondered how long that could last. It must have been the tail end of the Mao years, maybe the moment Rama heard the saxophone. A few notes played in his friend's attic, lookouts posted on the stairs, the strings intensifying take. He felt new birth, no time to think, some leaves unfurled in time's gavotte, deliberate, distinct. And that's for Ghent Sally, who the last I knew was doing a internship in Washington after going to Kosovo to visit his family. Know, K-N-O-W. 1. Sorrow taught us, since we refuse to call it death, it must be life, eh? At the well, the stranger gives us drink. Do you know how far we've trudged to get here? No. There are more and more of us each day. Think of those you don't know and who you soon could be. 2. Somewhere your light, made of shards, sometimes that light swells, but soon you're far away again. Your road to truth gutted with lies, you're very slow. Some, so cruel, say we haven't come far enough. Where are you now? So that's pretty obvious. It's the people who are suffering all over the world talking to those of us who are fortunate enough not to be suffering. Now here's a poem about Kathy Kollwitz. It's called Lithography. Kathy Kollwitz Museum, Berlin, Germany. Fasanenstrasse, close to my hotel. At last I'm at the Kollwitz Museum. Hunger, a desperate-looking woman, her heavy breasts hang down, the palm of one hand propped on an elbow supports her head. The face shows she's forfeited dreams and hopes. Next, homework, Heimarbeit, 1925. A woman at her kitchen table, her bent head, eyes half closed, the contours of her face filled with sorrow, fatigue. The fingers of her left hand dutifully clasp her stitching. I think I better have a glass of little water. Right in the middle of the poem, sorry. In your self-portrait of 1936, the miserably wise, prematurely old face of a spurned prophetess suggests irreconcilable distance. Here in your city, already steeped in grief, you said, I feel it, my art, my duty. You call the decade of your 30s your happy time, your thriving young family, fine times viewing art in Paris. So why am I only half surprised that in those years you're smiling in only one self-portrait? Selbstbildnis, self-pictures you call them. Woodcuts, a rare medium for you. I find one, Devotion of Working Men at Karl Liebknecht's Beer. Your comment, I didn't always agree with him, but when he was shot, I felt more sympathetic. Hitler had you removed from the academy, forbidden to exhibit. Deaths of your grandson in 1914, your son Peter in World War II, Peter, who as a child had posed with you as dead in your arms. The two of you ached like Michelangelo, and Peter had said, Don't worry, Mother, it will be very beautiful. Only the greatest of artists could have subordinated your excruciating premonition to this masterpiece. Death that same year of your beloved doctor husband, Carl, who cared for the poor without fee. You died in 1945, were spared nothing of your country's horror, left us 100 successive self-pictures, self-portraits really, recording faithfully your anguished compassion, opposite of vanity. You wrote to us, this is who you are. You must know it and feel always for all of us. Rettet die Kinder, save the children. Nie wieder Krieg, never again war. Another anti-war poem, Manliness, or Leave It at That. I'm reading a badly mauled copy of Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. Quote, sea rations, can openers, lighters, matches, photographs. Quote again, they all carried ghosts. Men killed and died because they were embarrassed not to. And I come across the word manliness scrawled here and there in large black marker. Tell myself it's sarcasm until I find it again beside, quote, the thumb of the Vietnam corpse Sanders gave Bowker, who otherwise a very gentle person, carried it around, brown, rubbery. Manliness? When my friend George started his loud, in-your-face, no war rant, I told the grinning couple at the next table, This man was a medic, Purple Heart, 3 times in Vietnam. He's earned the right. Leave it at that. Grace Paley, many of you know her. She was one of our treasures up here, and she died, it was about a year ago, or was it 2 years? I'm losing track. She's very much on my mind a lot, her work. Grace Paley. When my poet friend finished her reading, a man in the audience told her, "You can't do that." It worried her, but we agreed it was absurd. Once a male writer accused me, "You want to be a woman and a poet." I didn't bother answering. Grace Paley, famous fighter, wrote, "All poets should be women." She believed in the transcending femaleness of men like Whitman, who nurtured the wounded soldiers of the Civil War and, weeping, longed to raise them to where they're meant to be, not hungry, cold, or sick, not beaten, bombed, or shot. This is what Grace Paley meant. She added, and this time be listened to. Okay, I've come to the cheerier part of the book, quote unquote cheerier. It starts with a poem called "With Love" that took place, this event took place in a writer's retreat I had a fellowship to in Switzerland, which was quite near Geneva. With love. No one can say it wasn't romance. Curlers still in my hair, my disheveled efforts to retrieve a phone call, my insistent, repeated hello, and from the nervous Empire-style drawing room waiting for its guests, hello, hello. I peer into the room and we collide. You're gray-haired, bearded, with a kind of twinkling, crinkled face I never could resist. I joke about my appearance, leave you with orders to answer the phone. Finish dressing, might as well make you feel at home. You're reading Akhmatova, the great Russian poet. We fit ourselves together like the pieces of a puzzle on the plush silk couch, and you let the Russian words tumble out of you like manna. My favorite, March Elegy. Whose hand out there is waving like a branch? Yours, but only in its Russian. Are the words tears? Sorry about this. Are the words tears or furious, ghostly waterfalls? Both of our fathers left Russia in the same year for the same reasons. You pick up René Char, begin reading him in French, but your friends from Geneva greet you, and I move on. While shaking someone's hand, glance over my shoulder, see you're trying hard to take in a few more Chars. After my reading, you tell me, you are the Romans and we are the Greeks. You have a lot of responsibility. We talk about getting published and you urge me. If you go deeper, no one will be able to resist. No one ever can. You kiss my hand and we continue talking politics with 2 Chinese gentlemen from the UN who smile and tell us we can fix everything with love. Maybe some of you saw the film about the Chauvet caves that was at the Nugget a few years ago. I think the information is in the poem. Okay, the Chauvet caves. Blue clouds and the intricacies of the darkening trees set off against a slate-colored sky, appeared before me when I left the film about pristine caves found in 1994, having been sealed by an avalanche thousands of years before. My mind was brimming with delicate Paleolithic carvings of lions, bison, the lower half of a great stone woman's fecund body, slim-headed, much-loved horses, their mouths slightly open, they, like all the other animals, brilliantly in motion. I thought about the film's interview with an archaeologist who suggested we go out from the caves to find what relates, as he did in Australia, where Aborigines were still carving in stone. When he told one of these artists his carving was beautiful, the reply was, "I am not the one who's doing it," and the young scientist understood the artist's spirit was carving. I, too, went out of the theater to find what relates. Affectionate black trees against a slate sky, scattered indigo cumuli hovering solicitous above smoky trees, something I'd never seen before and wouldn't see again in 1,000 years. The Blessed Sun, 1. Wallace Stevens called it the brave man, and I agree. He keeps trying to come out and finally manages. Everybody looks up, smiles, like a child home from school. Hey, Dad's home. Oh boy. 2. A boudoir of azaleas, silky, pinkish mauve, a few late dimplers, the rhythm of azaleas, their erotic song this dying afternoon. 3. On the bus, an Asian toddler, round pumpkin, stares at me from his mother's lap, but when I wave, he burrows into her. His huge midnight eyes vanish under their lids. Well, let's see. Here's a very short poem about Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo often clutched the eye, Leonardo often sketched the eyes of cats and horses, their soulfulness, a wistfulness, horse grazing, cat bathing. Why parse the dance Leonardo saw? This was really something very nice that happened to me that happens very seldom to us poets. Someone wrote to me, he had seen this poem in a journal, and he said that he returned to it 3 or 4 times and told me why he liked it so much. And I don't remember what he said, but I was thrilled that he said it. A dirt road in the country. It's as if you're gliding into birth or death, driving here beneath these oaks and pines, the mountain up ahead, and a bird, its sharps and flats divinely singled out to sing to you. The road itself is true enough, the deep green leaves all nattering, devising schemes for flawless counterpoint, your terrors, naked half-devouring dreams, your karma all gentled out, as if you're still that bit of star no one and nothing can explain except for where you are here on this dirt road. Gratitude. And this has an epigraph from a novelist I love, Anita Bruckner, her book, Leaving Home. In any case, I prefer my garden on misty mornings at unpopular times of the year, compelling in their silence and secrecy. Gratitude. It could be the rain which comforts tears the way the sea makes dogs exuberant, and mist is promising. Gray days have good ways, I used to tell the kids. All the work of planting, grooming, growing done, the garden needs a little mussing up. You can see it better when it's fainter. It lets you in. You feel hugged. The unobtrusive insects may be sleeping, the crickets singing gratefully. I've got 2 cat poems in here. The Cat Sleeping His Life. This is really a love poem to my cat, who is in the picture on the back of the book. It's the same picture I used in my last book. The Cat Sleeping His Life. Centered upon a few necessities, insisting on suspiciousness of marriages and such, though here, when truly here, and otherwise asleep, which I believe's the only honesty. You lower your white eyelashes. I'm not allowed to know exactly when you'll leave again, drop deep into yourself. Still, there's the constancy of your good looks, the way you pose yourself to match your moods, the soul food of those brilliant choreographies, like all great art. My petting fine, then suddenly too much. You are the abstract genius of your dreams, reliably transmuting faithlessness, despair, into a little joy and hope. And when I write you, now asleep, I want to cry out, look, see what we've done together, you and I. There's nothing that I need that you are not. Cat lover. These are a couple of poems for the Venetian exhibit, which was shown at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, 2009. Venus Rising from the Sea, Titian, 1520, and that was from the National Gallery of Scotland in Edinburgh. Venus Rising from the Sea. Her gently sloping back suggests a kind of civil erudition with which her calm shoulders and her lovely, watchful face agree. Arms raised lazily, she clasps her long auburn braid with both plump hands. The laughably tiny seashell on which she's said to have surfaced seems to keep shrinking on the indigo waters in which she's standing thigh-high. Why is she staring off to the left, her hazel eyes ablaze? Maybe that's another one of those piteous pursuers. These are actually 4 poems from that exhibit, but I'll only read 2. 3, Mars and Venus United by Love, Veronese, mid-1570, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City. Mars and Venus. Even the horse off to his left looks saddened, seems to be shrinking like Venus's shell, while Cupid's little helper barricades what's left of him. Will Mars find any peace even here at her breast? The god in full regalia, huddled against her lush nakedness, seems too preoccupied to notice Cupid tying the lovers' feet together. There are actually three of the Van Gogh poems I had in my previous book. I have 7 poems from my previous book in here. Van Gogh poem, Self-Portrait, 1887. During the Paris years, he painted himself repeatedly because he was too poor to pay models. This one's framed in gilt that urgently presents the plain strength of its wood. The nervous, Seurat-like brushstrokes on his rough shirt, his fierce eyes, an ambush demanding, "So you've discovered unhappiness. Well, that's not enough. What will you do with it, I want to know." And that's what I imagined he was saying with that harsh glare. I have a picture of him on my desk. The church at Auvers, that's a painting of his. This is not a church, it's l'église, the French word for church. The walls sing, metamorphic spirits dream about a little thievery. It's not how Vincent saw things in his churchy life before he taught painting to goad his soul. In these shifting winds, storms caucusing behind them, the vacant windows stare mournfully at the approaching woman, holding her purse tightly before her. They want to hear the old, inspired supplications soaked in praise, afire with ingenuities. Darkness is blanketing the grass near its stone. Its clock has no hands. We hear a timeless moan. Now here's a poem, Akhmatova. She was one of the greatest poets of 20th century Russia. There were 4 of them, and they were all great. Boris Pasternak was one of them. They were called the 4. Akhmatova, 1. In your balakhana, did you think also of those of us to come? Tortuous race, we crowd you, your brilliant white. Is it there by that luminescent lake that you learned, unlike us, to envy the woman you became? 2. I'm swimming through rapids, my oars, my splintered limbs, my rebel cry. How many times can it be too late? This actually happened, what I'm going to read to you. It's a prose poem. By the way, some people complain about the fact that I use words and refer to artists that they don't know, but they can all be looked up on the internet, if not in a dictionary or encyclopedia. Sequence. The logic of Heraclitus can only be confirmed sequentially. With practice comes the ability, as sometimes in dreams, to notice the significance of a sequence we experience. For instance, a woman standing in front of me at the bank turned around and introduced herself as Star, then told me she had just opened a bread and breakfast called Angel's Nest. She added that one can stay there free of charge, quote, if you bring a dog or some other angel. When I emerged from the bank, I met and was finally able to have a conversation with Giovanni Di Marino after 2 or 3 earlier, somewhat nuanced encounters. He was wearing his usual French beret, navy blue raincoat, and Birkenstocks, still had those dark, baggy circles under his sad eyes, and he was tying up his little dog Seamus in front of the espresso restaurant, which we were both about to enter. Once inside, having offered to join me with his glass of red wine, he drew me a lovely pen and ink of a woman writer with birds and a feather and a helmet of fruit and flowers. I thanked him, then mentioned that I was thinking of moving again. I was living in Gloucester, Mass. Then. To this, the strangely alert Giovanni replied, "It's not important where you move to, only that you move." Next, he stressed the importance of noticing where you are as you are turning a corner, since, quote, "everything good happens in an Augenblick," flick of an eyelash. And more good than that could be misleading with the truth itself in motion. Woo! I'm reminded of something by these startling words of a world traveler now working as a nursing assistant for Alzheimer's patients. One should be especially on the watch when feeling stuck in a dilemma. Occasionally, the needed gift of disclosure will be bestowed. I'm going to read a couple more, and then we'll wind up. This is a poem about the death house, the place where prisoners go before they're injected lethally. The Last Pad was a play by a man named William Inge, which, well, I have notes on the back of the book, but it was a play put on by the Vermont and New Hampshire Civil Liberties Union about capital punishment. The Last Pad. A long, hard sigh rises, achieves the cracks in the floorboards. The inmates in their cells seem calm for the moment, their conversations curious tenacity. This familiar soughing that bites us democratically makes us watch, listen, remember. How many deaths have we fielded in hearts the media's meddled with? Quote, "We kill to show that killing's bad," says an ACLU button. Sounds of quiet waves whispering, "No, not again. Please let live, let learn, or else you too may not survive." Well, the last poem in the book is this one, and then I'm going to read someone else's poem, which I always like to do at the end of a reading or the beginning. Lauren Mazel, an orchestra conductor in Lauren Mazel in Pyongyang. As an encore, the New York Philharmonic plays a folk song much loved both in the South and the North. As the little tune is played over and over again, more and more grandly and flowingly, the cameras focus on the beauty of the musician's hands and instruments, and then on members of the audience. A woman in a tailored suit bows her head and seems to weep. The audience stands up, keeps on clapping. Then they wave joyously, and the players wave back, the saddened ocean still between them. But it wasn't just then, was it? Now, this is a poem by Tomas Sandstrom. I was going to bring a whole book of his wonderful translations. It's wonderful translations of his poetry. He won the Nobel Prize about 2 years ago. And I love this poem. Allegro. After a black day, I play Haydn and feel a little warmth in my hands. The keys are ready. Kind hammers fall. The sound is spirited, green, and full of silence. The sound says that freedom exists and someone pays no tax to Caesar. I shove my hands in my hiding pockets and act like a man who is calm about it all. I raise my hiding flag. The signal is we do not surrender, but want peace. The music is a house of glass standing on a slope. Rocks are flying. Rocks are rolling. The rocks roll straight through the house, but every pane of glass is still whole. Tomas Sandstrom was also a pianist and a psychologist in prisons. Thank you so much for being with me today.